It is June 22nd, 2026. Keir Starmer stands outside the famous Black Door of 10 Downing Street and calls it quits after scarcely 2 years in office. Just like that, the United Kingdom is queuing up its 7th Prime Minister in a single decade. 7 leaders, 10 years. The top executive job in British politics currently has the job security of a seasonal retail worker. You get hired, you deal with a completely unreasonable public, you survive a few brutal shifts, and you are aggressively shown the door before the holiday merchandise even clears out. Now pan your camera over to Moscow and Beijing. Vladimir Putin has been sitting in the Kremlin, unchallenged, since the year 2000. Xi Jinping has been running the Chinese state with absolute unquestioned authority since 2012, while London has been playing a humiliating, hyperactive game of political musical chairs. Putin and Xi have been playing a multi-decade game of grand strategy. They do not pack moving boxes. They do not give tearful, rain-soaked resignation speeches to the press. They just rule. To the casual observer, the geopolitical scoreboard looks completely one-sided right now. The West looks weak. It looks fractured, endlessly disorganized, and totally incapable of executing a long-term plan. When you look at London burning through national leaders like cheap batteries, or Washington navigating another highly unpredictable transactional Trump administration, the democratic system looks like a massive, glaring liability. Then you look east. The East looks unified. It looks disciplined. It looks incredibly dangerous. But what you are watching on the daily news is not a story of inevitable Western collapse and permanent Eastern triumph. It is a masterclass in misdirection. To understand why this is happening, we have to drop the political correctness. Stop thinking about geopolitics as a moral battle between democracy and autocracy, or good guys versus bad guys. Strip all of that away. Treat these nations exactly as what they are: massive, self-interested, pragmatic corporations. They just have entirely different management structures. Think of the United Kingdom as a legacy, blue-chip corporation. It's old, it's bureaucratic, and it moves slowly. In this corporate structure, the Prime Minister is just the CEO. And as we've seen, the CEO can be fired for almost anything. A bad PR week, missing quarterly earnings, or just a vicious round of internal office politics. But here is the secret of the British system. The company keeps running. When Keir Starmer steps down, or when Liz Truss crashed the bond market, the actual machinery of the British state did not pause for a single second. The Ministry of Defense, the Bank of England, the intelligence apparatus of MI6, the nuclear submarine fleets, and the sprawling civil service. These are the permanent board of directors. They operate on autopilot. They genuinely do not care who is standing at the podium at 10 Downing Street. The CEO is temporary. The machine is permanent. Now contrast this with Russia and China. They are not legacy blue-chip companies. They are run like aggressive, high-risk, founder-led tech startups. In Moscow and Beijing, all the equity, all the decision-making, and all the lethal power are concentrated into a single individual. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are not just CEOs who can be voted out by a board of directors. The state is the man. There is no independent civil service or military apparatus operating in the background. Every general, every banker, and every intelligence chief owes their absolute survival to the founder. Any nation of millions of people is going to generate extreme friction. Economic downturns happen, pandemics happen, wars drag on. In a democratic system, the messy, embarrassing political turnover is actually a highly engineered pressure release valve. When the British public gets crushed by the cost of living or furious about a scandal, they blow a gasket. The system responds by publicly humiliating and ejecting the Prime Minister. It is chaotic. It looks incredibly weak on the global stage, but it works. It vents the steam. It resets the public anger, gives the illusion of a fresh start, and most importantly, it prevents the actual building from burning down. In an autocracy, that pressure valve does not exist. It has been welded shut in the name of stability. When Keir Starmer packed his bags, it wasn't just a bad day at the office. It was the result of a massive populist undercurrent. Reform UK and fractured domestic factions have been applying relentless pressure, turning British politics into an absolute pressure cooker. The incoming leadership isn't thinking about global strategy or the defense of the liberal international order. They are scrambling for political survival on a week-to-week basis. They are fighting for their domestic lives. To Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, this looks like Christmas has come early. Putin looks at London and Washington and sees a closing window of opportunity. He is currently grinding out a brutal war of attrition, throwing meat and metal into the gears and entirely banking on the idea that Western voters will get bored, change their leaders, and pull the plug on funding. He doesn't need to win a glorious military victory. He just needs to outlast the next 3 Western election cycles. Meanwhile, in Beijing, Xi Jinping is looking at the exact same data points. Xi is watching the Taiwan Strait, calculating the cost of a move that could reshape the 21st century. The danger right now isn't just that the UK looks weak. The danger is that the autocrats might actually believe the illusion. They are looking at the superficial chaos of democracy and mistaking it for terminal structural failure. They think the West is too busy fighting itself to fight back. And that miscalculation is exactly how global conflicts begin. Let's give credit where it's due. On paper, autocracy looks like a cheat code for grand strategy. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping don't have to waste time doing morning talk shows to defend their budgets. They don't have to worry about a sudden vote of no confidence throwing them out of office by next Friday. If Xi wants to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into building a global network of ports through the Belt and Road Initiative, he just signs a paper. If Putin wants to pivot his entire national economy toward manufacturing artillery shells for a 10-year war, there is no parliament to filibuster his decision. They can think in decades, while Western politicians think in weeks. But this brings us to the ultimate strategic blind spot, the dictator trap. Here is the cynical reality of absolute power. When you spend 20 years executing, poisoning, or locking up anyone who points out your mistakes, you eventually achieve total obedience. But you also achieve something else. You inherit a room completely filled with terrified yes men. Geopolitics is a game played with data. To make good decisions, a leader needs accurate, unvarnished, brutal facts. But in an autocracy, delivering bad news is a career-ending move, and sometimes a life-ending one. Think of it like a corporate middle manager who knows the company's new product is a fire hazard, but they are too terrified of the unhinged billionaire CEO to tell him. So they falsify the report, slap a smiley face on it, and pass it up the chain. Multiply that by an entire superpower state. Now let's look at the other side of the board. Consider what happens when a leader makes a catastrophic error in a democratic system. When Liz Truss spooked the bond markets and crashed the UK economy in 2022, she didn't get to double down for a decade to save her ego. She was ruthlessly neutralized by her own party in exactly 49 days. When Keir Starmer lost the political plot in 2026 amid a populist surge, the party ripped him out to survive. There was no civil war. There were no tanks on the streets of London. The system identified a liability, ejected it, and moved on. It corrects its own mistakes brutally and swiftly. To understand why the country doesn't collapse during these political musical chairs, we need to talk about the deep state. Forget the conspiracy theories. Forget the idea of shadowy villains smoking cigars in a secret room. The actual deep state is much more boring and much more powerful. It is institutional inertia. The British state is anchored by permanent institutions that simply do not care who lives at number 10 Downing Street. The military and intelligence, the Ministry of Defense, the nuclear deterrent, Trident, and the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network run on decades-long strategic timelines. MI6 does not pause its operations because there is a leadership race in Parliament. The financial bureaucracy, the Bank of England, and the Treasury continue managing the currency, issuing bonds, and regulating global financial flows based on hard math, not the Prime Minister's approval ratings. The civil service, hundreds of thousands of career bureaucrats keep the borders running, the tax revenue flowing, and the lights on. The foreign policy of a Western power is a supertanker. You cannot turn it around in a week, even if the new captain wants to. This is why Western democracy is essentially geopolitical titanium. Titanium is not the prettiest metal. It gets scratched easily. it gets scuffed up. Looking at British politics right now is like looking at a heavily dented, scratched piece of metal. But titanium has a distinct engineering advantage. It bends under immense pressure without snapping. Autocracies, on the other hand, are completely different materials entirely. And as we are about to see, what happens when you put those materials under the ultimate stress test is the exact reason why the West's messy survival mechanism is its greatest weapon. Democracies are like a massive, highly dysfunctional family. On a normal Tuesday, they absolutely hate each other. They will scream, throw plates, and try to kick each other out of the house over the slightest disagreement. But the absolute second an armed stranger kicks down the front door, the internal fighting instantly evaporates. When confronted with a genuine existential external threat, the noise of Western politics abruptly shuts off. The squabbling, temporary politicians suddenly fall in line behind the massive, permanent institutional machinery we talked about in the last chapter. The military-industrial complex spins up. The auto-renewing alliance subscriptions of NATO and AUKUS activate. The messy titanium of the democratic system stops bending and locks rigidly into place. Suddenly, the autocrat isn't fighting a fractured parliament or a temporary prime minister. They are fighting a unified, highly integrated global corporate machine that holds the majority of the world's capital and naval power. And when that unexpected resistance hits the autocratic system, we see the true danger of tempered glass. In a dictatorship, there is no give. There is no opposition party to blame. The founder of the startup cannot fire himself. If Xi Jinping moves on Taiwan and fails to take the island in 3 weeks, or if the resulting Western blockade crashes the Chinese economy, who takes the fall? If Vladimir Putin's meat grinder in Eastern Europe finally drains the last drops of the Russian treasury, where does the public anger go? It goes straight to the very top. Because the dictator has made themselves the absolute center of the state, every failure is exclusively their fault. It is an all-or-nothing gamble. If the military fails, the regime falls. If the economy collapses, the state shatters. There is no graceful exit. There is no retirement. Geopolitics isn't about who has the cleanest living room. It's about whose house is still standing when the hurricane hits. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, remember to like, subscribe, and share.